The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. I'm David Juran, happy to be a Juran Fellow and hosting today's webinar. Our subject, Driving a Culture of Excellence Through Effective Knowledge Transfer. Knowledge is going to be our focus. It was the focus from the very first day that Dr. Juran started lecturing and showing people new ways of doing business. And it's never more important than it is today when his successor, Dr. Joe DeFeo, will be taking us through an explanation of the critical importance of knowledge and how to move knowledge from person to person for achieving results of high excellence. So if you have questions at any point, feel free to type them in. I'll keep an eye on them, and so will Joe. And when it's appropriate to break the flow a little bit, we may address a question directly as it comes up, or by the end, we'll be sure that every question is addressed. So you're in for a treat. You're now going to be hearing from one of the world's best respected experts in quality and excellence. Joe?
Thank you, Dr. Juran, and welcome everyone from around the world. Really appreciate you joining in, and hopefully this will be actually a fun one for me. I have been a teacher since I started teaching high school many years ago, and then technical instructor, and then a classroom trainer, college professor, and consultant trainer. And so education has been my career. And I thought I was in the knowledge transfer business, of which I was, but I thought that was really the only way to transfer knowledge. And through the use of these webinars, staff member, Matt, who runs our strategy and product development, said, you know, you ought to do a webinar on knowledge transfer since you keep talking about knowledge transfer. And so we talked about it and said, well, let's talk about how knowledge transfer is helping organizations drive a culture of excellence, because our last session was designing a culture of excellence and operational excellence. So why not talk about how this knowledge transfer stuff can actually help drive that? And so that's how this session came about. For those of you who have been around a while, you know the pattern here, but those of you who are new, please submit any questions you have at any time. And as Dr. Juran says, you'll also get a link to this afterwards. And I hope you enjoy the show. So today we have three objectives, which typically come from the marketing literature you have. And that is to show a relationship between knowledge transfer and building a new culture. And we hope that you're building a new culture based on excellence and quality management and good customer experience, because there are other cultures you can build too, and this one's related to the operational excellence that we all are part of. Also gain a deeper understanding of how a transfer knowledge system may work and drive that culture. And then I'm going to give you an example from our own use as to how you can organize, capture, and distribute knowledge, which is knowledge transfer. Because some of you were not on the Design for Excellence, I'm going to do just a quick definition and a rewind to make sure that you know what we're talking about when we talk about a culture of excellence. There are many ways to describe this. My 30 years at Juran, we describe it as a big Q system, big quality system. Begins with a great customer experience, satisfied and engaged employees, and the key word is engaged. That the organization is good to society, meaning they consider the environmental impacts, if they're a product company, their social impact, their cultural impact. Repeatable finances, that means we strive hard to be high performing on the financial side. We have agile and reliable processes because we know that the key to success at driving customer satisfaction and repeatable finances is that we don't create cost of poor quality. And of course, we have products and services that are the best in class, meaning that customers want them. This is one way to describe a culture of excellence. And as some of you may feel you are in a organization that is excelling, some of you are on the road to it, and some of you are kind of questioning how to get there. So when we talk about creating a culture of excellence, it really means about implementing a management system where the models, principles, methods, and tools will drive excellence for the customer in everything that your employees do, so that you get those sustainable business results. And I'm calling it a management system because that's what we here at Juran and Dr. Juran espouse, that if you want quality to happen, if you want great financials to happen because customers are experiencing a great service or product for your organization, then it must be management's responsibility. The model that you choose, whether it be a Six Sigma model, European Federation of Quality model, a Toyota production system model, that model should have principles and methods and tools that drive customer satisfaction, not just tools that drive out cost. So we talk about a successful management system driving excellence in everything we do so that our customers can count on us. And in the end, we will enable sustainable results. Most cultures of excellence are enterprise-wide focus, meaning we don't just look at the supply chain, we don't just look at the product or little Q, we look at the business, but we may begin with the product because ultimately that's what the customer is impacted by. But if you're in a hospital, the customer you deliver results to is not just the patient, it could be the patient's family. And that patient could be a young child or an elderly person, and therefore you want to accommodate not just the patient's health and outcome, but to accommodate the family. In order to accommodate the family, you might have to think of things beyond what the patient is getting. So when we think about Big Q, we think about customers as a much larger group of folks. Similarly, if you're a pharmaceutical company and you make prescription medicines, or you create some medical devices, that the patient must use them and free from harm and hopefully gain the outcome that they're supposed to from it, which might be improved health, but also the physician that has to administer that, or the caregiver or the nurse can also be seen as a customer. So when we think about an enterprise-wide focus and an excellent culture, we think about our customers in a much broader way. Therefore, when we drive business results, it's not just because the product is good, but it's because our business is good. And when we look at what drives business results, we look at our key business processes and value streams. Those are the things we do every day. And we also have our enablers, like our quality management system, and influencers, like our human resource, talent development, financial support, IT support systems as well. But that's all driven from a business plan where we make a choice to want to be an excellent culture and be that quality leader. The driver of those business plans come from assessments of the market and understanding those customer needs. So when we think about an excellent culture, we think about enterprise-wide focus, and we move left to right. And we don't give up on it. We continue to drive and strive, because the one thing that's always changing is the market and customer needs. So therefore, we as an organization have to change. Now, within an organization, we tend to set up what's called an infrastructure, something that helps us nurture the excellent system. So if you start on the left and say we understand our strategic drivers and we continually assess our current state, it leads leadership to create plans. Some of those plans require us to create better work environments, or we standardize our daily work. Others drives projects or events like Lean and Six Sigma-like projects. And others is just executive action, getting a strategy and a business plan that's going to help us succeed. All of those activities will eventually drive the culture. Now, you can drive the culture to be a cost-cutting culture. You could drive it to be a highly customer-focused culture. It's your choice. We're making a choice, and we're making a statement that a culture of excellence is one that supports Big Q, supports the customer. Now, the real focus of this webinar is that top box, that you have data and knowledge management that are being captured and then being utilized to help sustain and drive this Big Q system. Historically, the data we have in our systems, we have to mine. We mine that data to create scorecards. We mine that data to find root cause. We mine that data to complete and make improvements happen. We also use that data daily for standardized daily control and daily work. And we also have big data, bigger about the market and customers. That data is inherent in the system. We have to mine it and turn it into information. Knowledge management is also something new that is part of your data management system. It's the recording of all the lessons learned. It's the recording of all the outcomes, of all that improvement, of all that assessment, of all that new stuff. And it's embedded somewhere, and that contains information that can be useful later. So this webinar here is going to be focused on that knowledge management piece and how it can help drive the culture and sustain a culture of excellence. Now, it wouldn't hurt to ask a simple question: what is knowledge? Because what we're talking about in transfer knowledge is how do we get knowledge from one person to another? How do we get it from one person today to another person at some point in the future and have it as still relevant? So first we have to look at what knowledge is. And knowledge is really a bunch of data, which are facts and truths to the best of our ability to find them. And that data can help us, through the information we gather about it, make business decisions, create opinions that can help us do something different. So if we have the right data, we can gather that data, put it in a way that helps us make decisions. So if we have data on customer perception and we have information from that data that shows how they perceive our product, then we might be able to create better product development or better products or better services. If we have internal data on how our processes are performing, that data in itself is nothing unless we take that data and put targets to it and hold it to that target. And so knowledge is the information we need that helps us make good decisions. Simply a watch or a clock on the wall, a watch on your wrist or a watch on your phone is data that tells us all the time what's happening in a clock. And so we use that information to be on time for appointments. Organizations are full of data and organizations are full of information. The job of making decisions is to make sure you have the right data and make the right decision with the right information. That's part of it. The other part is how can we capture that so that the next time a similar problem comes around, the next future employee might be able to save time and effort and not reinvent the wheel. Now, knowledge management has been around for a long time, but more importantly, knowledge management and the technologies used to capture knowledge has become much more apparent in the last 5 to 10 years. I particularly was a novice at the knowledge management systems until my own staff said, you know, we really need to move in a more technological way. We looked at knowledge management and knowledge sharing as after we did our training workshop for you, we would give you our templates and our tools so that we can transfer our knowledge to you so that you can do it. And then within your organization, you continue that. Well, today it's more than that. It's the process of how we create, share, use, and manage that knowledge and information within the organization. So I know that when I taught a training class to my client and the client took all those tools and templates, that client then had to take and train and coach more people. But if we don't have a common system of carrying that out, 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, the message might have changed purposely or might have changed because someone didn't really understand what was going along the way. In other words, there was no knowledge coaching. Knowledge management also refers to a multidisciplinary approach to achieving organizational objectives, which is the part about driving culture here. If we could share the knowledge of what makes us great, share the knowledge of what the customers want, share the knowledge of root cause corrective action, share the knowledge of how to analyze and make processes better, and we do that across our functions, we are going to be a much better organization because we are making use of knowledge that is already there, and we're going to speed up what we do. The third part of knowledge management is the knowledge transfer piece. And that is how can we keep this information and organize it for future use? Now, many of you do understand that knowledge transfer happens all the time. We transfer knowledge when we talk to each other. We transfer knowledge when a parent is teaching a child to do something. We transfer knowledge when we touch something hot and we realize that we should not do that and we don't do it again. So transferring knowledge for future use is the key in a business as to how we can do that in a way that reduces the cost of knowledge gained and prevents a loss of that knowledge over time. Now, what's the relationship between knowledge transfer and a culture of excellence? For those of you who are pre-technology, meaning been around your organizations for, say, 15 years or more, or being in the business communities for 15 years or more, you have heard your leaders present strategies. You have heard your leaders send mail, emails, put posters on the wall that enable you as an employee to know what the expectations are. They use that mechanism to communicate. And for the most part, transferring knowledge historically was by means of some communication device. It could have been communicating in a classroom, could have been communicating between supervisor and leader through memos, through then email, through posters as reminders. So the way we communicated became the way we transferred knowledge. As an organization started to mature and realize that creating an excellence culture requires persistence and a journey to improve project by project, process by process, day by day, to get that great experience, you had to engage employees. Engaging employees, you had to teach them some tools. You had to remind them about things. You had to bring them together and allow them to collaborate. So as we're developing this culture, we're also learning things that can be replicated throughout the organization. For instance, if we know what customer dissatisfaction is, and we have a process improvement project to reduce that dissatisfaction, then we should create the knowledge that can prevent those things from happening in the future by recording that, and then make it easy to pull out of. And so if we can create better knowledge gathering, better knowledge transfer, we can support our culture of excellence, because some things that are happening today make it much easier for leaders and managers to be able to communicate what is important and what is not. Now, if you do some research, and I'm going to use Wikipedia as one source of knowledge transfer, and I don't necessarily believe everything I read, but I look for the research and the research papers that created it, and look at those actual research papers, and majority of the information you get is usable and credible. And the one thing we want to have in any knowledge transfer is credibility of information. So if you look up the research on knowledge transfer, you might see things like this, that knowledge sharing is the ability, or the architecture ability, to be close to a situation where people can use that information to be able to do their job. There are things like storytelling, cross-project learning. If you have a Lean and Six Sigma program or a quality improvement program, we have multiple projects. The sharing of those projects always become the best way to teach people what you're doing. And not only that, the information gained from a process improvement project and then sharing it teaches us about what our capabilities are. We used to call these postmortems, after action reviews, knowledge mapping, where we're trying to capture things. In other words, all these different ways that we try to capture information and share it with others. Now, I have been going to excellence conferences for over 35 years. Why do I go? Because conferences were a way to share information so that I could share what I know and gain from others and come back and do it. that is a costly proposition, only happens once or twice a year, and not everyone can go. But it was a way to do that. Today, due to technology, today, due to a different way we think about learning and communicating, it's much easier to do our knowledge transfer. Now, some of you are familiar with most mechanisms in your organization to transfer knowledge. Email was our kind of like, it's already fading a little, but clearly one of the easiest ways to send a strategy, to send a goal statement, to send a reward and recognition statement about how we're doing, or a metric, can be done through email. It's kind of a one-way direction, but it reminds us. We could put people in a classroom, teach them, reinforce them, and then take that same classroom and put it online, teach them, reinforce them. And where we've gone from is large-scale classrooms of 14, 16 days down to 14, 16 hours, and someday down to 14 or 16 minutes. Why? Because the ability to learn and support the learning is happening in multiple ways. We have various forms of communication. Many organizations have computers at your desk or large screens in the hallways, in the lunchrooms, that communicate direct speeches from leaders and teams, even to the point of collaboration on live events like we're doing right now. Google and Google-like search products are a means to gather information for us based on a topic and then transfer that to us. Whether you like Google or not, they're in the business of knowledge transfer and making money off that. Knowledge transfer comes through coaching, personal coaching. And personal coaching isn't happening just by sitting in a room with a personal coach anymore. It's on a phone, it's on a WebEx, it's on a technology platform where you might be collaborating with someone on a daily basis. It could be PDA coaching, it could be on your cell phone. And most likely, if you're in a larger company, you're using some internally developed learning management system, which has the ability to provide some level of training and learning, some idea and innovation creation, a database to hold a lot of your information, various documentation on how to do things, policies and procedures, and the ability to print reports. These means to transfer knowledge typically have all been evolving and all have been part of an organization's ability to provide a mechanism to learn and to transfer. Each have come with their own difficulties and each come with their own deficiency. So for instance, if we rely on emails to transfer knowledge, we have to be very careful that we're only transferring positive knowledge, because emails can be used for negative things. Also, finding the right email later on is often difficult. And email as a tool in technology evolves. Training classroom is still a great method of transferring knowledge. You get face-to-face immediate results in terms of communication with people. However, it's becoming more and more difficult for global organizations to pull people into the same place. The difficulty going to the next level is where you do teleconference style. Although you hear the message and you can see the person speaking, just like this webinar, you don't get exactly the greatest communication between you. So each one has some form of difficulty, but each one provides some means to transfer knowledge, because you can have an expert trainer repeating year after year what the training is. Now, interestingly, when I started with Juran Institute, Dr. Juran was about 78 years old, and he had already spent 30 to 40 or maybe even 50 years traveling around the world teaching about quality management. He had just completed what was called Juran Quality Improvement videotape series. There were 15 videotapes on how to carry out what we know as DMAIC today, basically, how to do a project, how to carry it out. And those 15 videotapes is how I learned, and many people, and some of you learned, because I see your names here, how to do improvement. And it hasn't changed all that much, but it was a knowledge capture, knowledge transfer product. When my staff asked me to do these webinars, and I really enjoy doing them, I'm actually doing each one to capture the knowledge I have so that they can kick me out the door one day and be able to record the knowledge we have. And that's exactly what many organizations are trying to do, trying to capture knowledge of past experience, current experience, and use it later on for competitive advantage. Now, today, we can even go one step further. We can create external and internal communities of knowledge transfer. So I'm sure some of you have seen some of these communities that you might be part of, where you're going. I know the American Society for Quality, our society, has a community. The Society for Manufacturing Excellence has a community. American Society for Electrical Engineers. They all have their own community. And what they're doing is they're sharing information. Naturally, that information comes with the good and the bad and the ugly, but there's a mechanism to share. And the more we share, the more we learn, but the key is how quick you can share and how fast you can get information. So, question I would have for you, and you can respond to this through the chat or asking another question, is, are any of you in your organization using your knowledge transfer abilities as well as you should be? Or, I would like to ask Dr. Juran, has anyone posted a question that I might be able to answer at this point before we move on?
Not yet, Joe. I'm just soaking it up and listening as you're transferring knowledge to my brain. But your question, again, you should ask it again, because we invite people now to use the chat tool to see if we can get a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, and there's quite a few people out there today, so please do so. And I use one barometer. If you drop off, I see when you drop off, and if we don't lose too many of you, I know you're still there, but I want to make sure you're awake, so that's why I ask you if you can drop us a line or ask us a question.
Oh, and I also see that we have a hand raise tool now, Joe, that just popped up on my screen. So ask it again and see if we can get people to find that hand raise.
So are any of your companies utilizing knowledge transfer technology or knowledge transfer systems to help drive your culture? And I'll come back to you in a few moments.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, here we go. So go a little bit deeper into that wonderful source. Knowledge capture, where we try to incentivize people. I'm going to give you an example. In hospitals, there's a mandate that a physician and a caregiver have to record and document the patient's condition, the patient's care, the treatment, the outcomes. And they're incentivized to do that, and they're penalized for doing that poorly. So there's a means forced upon them to capture the information, which then is used later for billing purposes and for historical purposes to understand clinical outcomes and the cause and effect of those clinical outcomes. There's also strategies out there that is a push strategy. Individuals try to record everything they know in some kind of shared knowledge repository or a database. This is what we've been doing with data for a long time. We shove information into a database and we have to sort it. The good thing is we're capturing stuff. The bad thing is we get noise and we get signal. And how do we find the signal? Another one is using experts like ourselves. Some of you are experts in your company. I try to be an expert out of my company. People send a question in, we give them an answer. So make those experts available as easily as possible so that people can ask questions and get insight when they need it. And so all this has been leading to is more personalization of knowledge sharing versus group sharing. In other words, I today have a question, I need to have an answer. I can get it from my internal source, or maybe I have to find it from an external source. Knowledge capture, knowledge transfer can help, I should say, an effective knowledge capture, knowledge transfer system can be useful to driving a culture. But I will tell you, finding the mechanism that works best for your company, finding it in a way that can provide usefulness and value is another. Now, why is it that today's platforms can do much more? Well, let's take a look at what we need to develop excellence. We want to have a means to communicate. We want to have a means to educate. We want to be able to remind people or direct their behaviors. Hey, and this is, when we use a calendar invite or a task reminder, we can direct the behavior to remind them. We share ideas. We share ideas when we brainstorm causes of problems. We share ideas, we brainstorm potential causes of problems, and then we try to prove them true. We brainstorm solutions to problems. We brainstorm to create new products and services, new ways of doing things. We need to coach people. People learn new tools, they need help. We need to be able to record information so that we can use that information for the future. And we want to be able to control the information. One thing I can't control necessarily when I Google or when I search is what I'm going to get back, unless I'm very specific. So if these are the things we need to drive a culture, then what can today's knowledge transform platforms do? Well, interesting, they do almost the exact same thing. They can be used as communication boards. They can provide educational links, such as your learning management system. They can direct behavior. You can have an employee online communicating with the coach. The coach can send reminders. The coach can ask questions. The coach can check up on them. If you're educating people, you can check and see if they're doing the training modules, how well they did, if they have problems. You can share ideas, you can coach. Clearly, it's information storage. And this is the one that I would say is the one which led us to build our own platform. You can control the messaging. And I don't mean limit objectivity, but there's a lot of garbage available in your data storage bank, and there'll be a lot of garbage in your information storage bank. I once went to a multinational company that had over 2,000 online workshops. Columbia University has over 1 million hours of online workshops. It's very hard to sort through all that. So in an organization, you can control it by packaging it properly, by sorting it properly, and by screening it properly. And so in the example I used of Dr. Juran years ago, he wanted to send a message about what his experience was in quality improvement, and he created this videotape series. Later, he wanted to do that about design and created a videotape series. It's a physical reminder of what it was. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't change over time, but at the time, it was his means to transfer knowledge, just like we're here today. And so one of the problems we had as an organization was our customers want less classroom, more individualized coaching. They wanted less groupthink, more personal think. And so what can we do to help them? So what we had to do was kind of search what's out there. We had online learning platforms where we would link people to our online learning modules. And initially, they were pretty PowerPoint presentations with a few quizzes. They later went to more video, better audio. They got graphically better. In other words, the learning started to look better and also make it easier to get online. So one element of what we were looking for was how do we keep the learning platform usable? Another one is people ask questions all the time, specifically like, what is a Pareto? What is a histogram? How do I create a project charter? How do I get my leadership to participate? And so there's this knowledge base out there that if we had answers to, we could provide the answer. Now, Google is a knowledge base in the sense that you can ask a question and get a response. But the response you get may not be screened. The response you get may be incorrect. So what we wanted to make sure was that we had a credible knowledge base. Libraries today are becoming credible knowledge bases to sort through information to be able to glean the real good research from the non-research. The pieces would have integrity from the ones that don't. So we wanted to have a knowledge base so that when people are going through the learning on their own, or they forget something later on, they can find a quick answer that might remind them. And that knowledge base within an organization might also provide them the right procedure, the policy, the template, the tool to use. And the third part of this transfer system should be somehow to share information. And this is the area where I find an internal community within an organization, I believe, has got the best chance for capturing knowledge without people really knowing it. By posing questions and getting people to respond to those questions, you're now capturing on an ongoing basis what people think in your organization. And the questions can be simple. So if you take these three pieces and say, okay, one form of transfer knowledge has to be education and training. So can you create an LMS that provides personalized dashboards or personalized roadmaps? We chose to link up and invest in a product called IMPRO, which is short for improvement. And you create your own dashboard. A supervisor and an employee, or a master black belt and a belt in training, or a champion and her staff, or a VP of finance and their staff can sit down and say, okay, what are the skills that we need to perform in this organization? And how can I learn some of those skills via my online dashboard and online roadmap? And you would populate the skills that they need through the training. And they would go through the training, and they might have a personalized coach that might check up on them. There may be some live webinars that they have to go to. There may be some assignments they have to do, carry out a project. But the learning platform is at your fingertips within the organization when you want it, on the subjects you need. The downside, you have to have the subject matter expertise internally and externally. In other words, we need people within the organization that we want to put up as our experts, and we want to have outside experts. So your learning platform could be a mix of internal and external. The knowledge base. There are so many topics an organization needs to know about, keeping in mind that our knowledge base is all about the operational excellence, quality management area. So we've designed it to kind of answer those kind of questions. But a Google is an unlimited knowledge base. And so you'll always have the ability to use that. But every time you go outside your organization, you have the chance of bringing something inside you don't want. So a knowledge base could be something you create internally and keep it from getting external. Our clients utilize this cloud-based system to get information that they may want to help drive their project, to help follow on. This knowledge-based capability and these online learning portals have really been a challenge to companies in the learning business, because once you publish something, it's out there for everyone. So where there's a lot of restricted material historically, today you have to share that information, and we do that via the knowledge base. And it's really simple. Type in a word, type in a question, see what comes up. And it also has got its own knowledge capability in it, which will keep a record of what people ask, and we can publish what are the most popular topics and things like that. And the third part is the most recent, I say recent, in the last 5 or 6 years, the use of communities that can be on a given topic, sharing information amongst each other, and doing it in a way that's polite and socially acceptable. And so if you're within your company and you're trying to implement this new transformation plan on how to get customer experience better, or even if we want to narrow that down to say, how can we reduce our cost, the poor quality, you can start gathering input from people through this easy access, takes a few minutes a day, few hours a month to get people in the habit, but you're communicating with it. I remember years ago that the communities of sharing were something like Glass Ceiling, a website that disgruntled employees go to complain about their bosses. And today, Facebook does some of that, where people complain about their company. And so you have to go out there and always look and see what people are saying about you. And the good thing about your own internal community is you can encourage that on a daily basis and find out what people are thinking. So our belief is that if you can develop a strategy about building a knowledge transfer system, you might be able to tie all these things that your organization is doing together in a coherent way that allows you to then build from we want a knowledge management system and a knowledge transfer system to actually doing it. I show here just what we always call our deployment roadmap for any large scale project. Decide what you need to do, prepare it. So we decide we wanted to have a more online learning platform capable of learning, sharing, and knowledge transfer. We made that decision. We then started to prepare by looking out what is available out there. There are platforms you can build yourself. There are platforms that are legacies. There are free platforms with a limited capability. So we prepared it. And in order to prepare it, you have to have content. And that content has to be in a way that's usable. So, if you're doing Six Sigma, yellow, green, and black belt, you might start with that. If you're doing lean, you might put that out there. If you're doing, financial accounting for your CPAs, you do that out there. But prepare it and then launch. And launch becomes, the beginning of getting people to use it. And then expand on it, and then obviously sustain that. So no real big lessons learned here, except don't try to get from here to there without going through prepare and launch. We've been working on this for a couple of years, and we've already changed our platform a couple of times. You may not see it, but we did, because new technologies come out and they start to change things. Our investment is to try to get something that's credible and with high integrity. And the technology keeps changing all the time, which makes you look with less integrity. So you always got to keep working on it. The good thing is that the cost of building these systems are a lot less than they used to be, and the ease of doing them are much better than they used to be. So before we say goodbye, I would like to say hello to a question or two that has been posted. I do see some hands up, and Dave, would you like to
Joe,
shoot a question off?
There are a couple of questions that get to the same point, and that is, how do we get our employees to use the material and the systems that we put in place for them, whether it's accessing a knowledge base to research a question, or to use some of the online training resources that we have. So the gist of it is, and this has to do with also one of the earlier questions, is how do we get the employees to believe that this is the way to go for them as well as for the company?
Well, I'm going to use myself as an example. I know my COO and my staff here 2 years ago were trying to help us understand that the new learners wanted to do things themselves. They wanted access to information themselves. Mm-hmm. And we would have to show up at their doorstep and give that information. And that's how we did things, but it was no longer the way to do it. So the first thing is you have to make it easy for people to get it. Okay. And so I think making it easy by allowing people to link into these systems, allowing people to get online. So one, make it easy. Two, make it useful. For instance, I recently was with an organization that spent thousands of hours of training dollars, thousands of hours in the classroom, thousands of dollars on training. And at post-training, people are going back to their books or trying to find the templates and tools. Well, you can make it easy by saying, here's the class, here's all these templates and tools available to you. Right after the class, you can access them when you want to do them. And by the way, here's a link to a coach anytime you want them. So make it easy, make it useful. And also, you don't have to make it perfect right away. And we're constantly evolving here too. And technology, the worry that you have is the technology becomes more expensive and you have to change it. Well, really interesting is the technology price is going down, and the majority of time is being spent changing it yourselves to keep up with customer needs. But one is make it easy, make it accessible, and make it useful.
I see a connection to one of the earlier questions here, where the person said, there's so many different ways of accessing knowledge, apps, that sometimes people are getting confused and they're not necessarily getting a good, consistent quality of information. So I would assume then the answer to that question is manage, manage, manage. Is that right, Joe?
Well, I think it's the same thing that when we, even one of my staff members said, if you're going to put something up from Wikipedia, remind people that it's not 100% accurate. Mm-hmm. And I don't use anything as an independent source. I verify things. So I look for the research paper that got referred to. So one is you want to have some way of detecting good from bad. And like I said, a library, their purpose is to help sort good from bad. Mm-hmm. And also credibility. So now even the best organizations don't always have credibility. I love Harvard Business Review, but I disagree with some of their research and publications. So one of the things that I think you have to go to a credible organization on what they're good at. Mm-hmm. Nobody's great at everything. So, we try to research and publish things about what we know. And so we have some ability to disseminate that in a way we feel confident. So one is, credible organizations, and within your organization, have a credible part of the organization own it and mm-hmm. sort it and manage it. And that's when, you get to a point where people start to believe it. So that's my take on that.
What role would people actually find either existing today or would they would want to adapt to, so that you have that person and or that group within an organization that manages the quality of knowledge transfer? Who's doing that these days? Is it the traditional quality person, quality professional? Is it a training person? Who do you envision, Joe, would be taking ownership of this very significant system?
Well, in the larger organizations that have evolved from learning management systems, there's a talent development, human resource part of the organization that owns that. Mm-hmm. But they tend to become the owner rather than the original designer. For instance, I want to transform my company. I'm going to do Lean and Six Sigma. We're going to do training. The HR people and trainers, experts get involved in making sure you do good training. But then you realize this is project by project, so we need project management. In project management, we need to record the projects. We need to review the projects. And so the process improvement function, the quality improvement function, starts to become the designer saying, hey, we need project management software. We need statistical analysis software. We need to be able to capture this information. We need a knowledge management. And then you kind of bring back those folks into it. So there's this evolving from the transformation need. It could be, for instance, in hospitals. Hospitals they were mandated to have electronic medical records. Mm-hmm. And so the electronic medical records began with an IT owner, but soon realized that, the user had to be the driver of the choice of how we do it. Mm-hmm. So I think there's the user who begins it, and then the function who maintains it. And we see the user being in quality, whether it be the performance improvement folks or the operations people, then eventually the talent management people. A lot of organizations don't have really big talent management departments, and so they typically might farm this off to the performance improvement group because a lot of the skill-based training might be related to that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that pretty well covers the posed questions, and it looked like a rather small sample of everyone raised their hand that they had a knowledge management system, transfer system in place, but that means there's plenty of good work ahead. So
I want to also add something, that we're going to begin to get knowledge sharing going. So if you would like to join the community of IMPRO, which is free, you can sign on and join the discussion that I'm going to continue as soon as I close this out about knowledge transfer. I'd also like to remind you that we do have public offerings. Right now, the ones we're showing are the Six Sigma ones. We have many others. And this is my free advertising for you guys coming. And if you have any questions, please send me directly at joedefeo or jdefeo@juran.com. And by the way, I want to put in a plug for next month's webinar. It's going to be on supplier quality and supplier quality management, one of the biggest issues that organizations faced in the last couple years. So I thank you all. Dr. Fearon, I thank you for coming and hosting it once again, and we see you all in the future.
It's always a favorite hour. Thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to hearing from you next time. Bye.